Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Bolland, and today, usually it's headlines or cool stories or top three things that I see on the internet when it comes to limb loss or the general disabled community. But today is a special day because today, this is the 100th episode of the We're Not Stumped podcast. So I'm going to celebrate and kind of talk a little bit about the podcast in general and what steps you can take to be on the We're Not Stumped podcast. So first of all, one of the things I want to go over is depending on what program you listen to me on, this could be the 99th episode, it could be the 101st episode, but for the most part, this is the 100th episode, just because different platforms do things differently, and I've done a couple, video-only podcasts, I've done some audio-only podcasts, so this one is officially the 100th as far as I'm concerned, and I can count to five, at least I have one hand, right? I can count to five on that one hand. So I've been doing this podcast for over 2 years now, and it's been a labor of love. I do everything single-handedly, not only because I have one hand, but because I edit everything myself. I enjoy doing it. I really do. One of the things about editing itself, I use DaVinci Resolve, and I use Audacity and other tools to do my editing. But one of the things that I have found from doing my own editing is that I get to listen to the podcast again and again and again, because you have to listen a lot while you're doing the editing. Anyone out there that does the type of editing that I do, especially for the video portion where I'm overlaying different pictures and things like that, know that it takes a little bit. But I get to know my guests better than ever because I have to listen to things, 10, 15 times sometimes, because I want it. I want the image or the video that I superimpose over a Zoom call, as an example, or even a live call like I did with Huzoni that came out a couple of days ago. I want it in the right spot. So I make sure, and because of that, I have to listen, which is great though, because like I said, I get to learn about my guests better than maybe than they have themselves. But I doubt that, of course. And it's just a pleasure. I mean, the guests that I've had on, thank you. Now that I've had over 100 episodes, I'd love to be able to sit here and thank everyone individually. But I think part of the accomplishment is it would be too daunting of a task and too boring of a podcast for me to bring to you. But please understand, if you've been on this podcast, it means a lot to me. And I'll say this too. Excuse me. I have a little bit of a cold. It means a lot to a lot of people. And I'm going to tell you why. I know there's episode 0 about why I decided to do the We're Not Stumped podcast really over 2 years ago. Here's the why. Because my thing was, there are people that are in the very early stages of their own limb loss journey, whether it be through an accident, whether it be through a medical condition, or maybe a parent like my parents were, of a newborn with limb loss or limb difference, that want to navigate the process. And my own personal story when it came to something very similar was my cancer journey. And my thing was, I remember I had throat cancer, by the way, in 2016, and I'm very happy to say that so far so good. I'm in remission and I'm healthy and everything's looking good. But I remember getting a PET scan, and I remember the doctor giving me at that time a DVD where they did the PET scan, and I was going to take that to my oncologist. Well, of course, what do I do, and what do most people do when they're faced with challenges like that? Well, in my case, I took the DVD and I found a DVD, because even DVDs 9 years ago or 8 years ago, they weren't as prevalent. So I had to find out what am I going to find in my external DVD player to look at it on my PC. So I did that, and I started looking at it, and then of course, what do? I go to Google and I start telling myself, or start researching how to read a PET scan. Okay, that was the worst thing I did, because as soon as I started looking at the actual PET scan and judging from all of the 5 minutes that I've been researching it, I thought it was all doom and gloom. Here's the deal, man. There are people they're professionals at reading a PET scan, and they know what they're doing, and I'm not going to be able to mimic that with 5 minutes. So it scared me, and I didn't know where to go, what to do. I finally said, you know what? I can't do this. I need to wait until I get into the oncologist and start going over it. And that's why I started the podcast. To go back, there are people that are in a hospital bed, or something traumatic has happened to them or their loved ones, and they don't know how to navigate it. So what do? Same thing I did. You get on Google and you start looking up limb loss, limb difference, amputation, amputee, And if you get a WebMD, God bless them, WebMD is a great resource, but it doesn't tell you the whole story. It tells you more of a medical or technical description of an amputation. Well, what I need to do, or what my goal was for this podcast, was to have people on that talked not just about that part of the journey, but about the entire journey, about the mental part of the journey, about the physical part with prosthetics, and things maybe people don't think about when it comes to being an amputee or within a limb loss community. And I can tell you what, over the last 2 years, some of the stories that have come out, I'm not worthy. You know what I mean? Again, I thank all the guests so much because of what they've been able to share. And I'll tell you this, that was the goal. If someone was laying in their hospital bed and they're wondering how to navigate this journey, but you don't know what you don't know. You wonder whether you're talking into an echo chamber. I can tell you from the stats right now, I know I'm not, because my podcast has absolutely exploded, and thank you to all the listeners out there. I mean, you certainly mean as much to me as the guest. But I've gotten feedback now, unbelievable feedback. And some of the feedback had to do with exactly my scenario. Mike, I was laying in a hospital bed. I didn't know what to do. I went to Google, and I stumbled across your podcast, and ex-guest meant the world to me. And thank you so much for helping them share their story, because it's helped me so much. It means a lot to me when I hear those stories. So thank you. Thank you, everyone, for making this podcast as successful as it's been. Yeah, it's just, I get emotional thinking about it. So let's go on to some other topics. I'm going to continue on with the podcast today. I'm going to talk about a redesign. And hey, if you're interested in being on the podcast, what are the steps? And what are the actual steps to doing this podcast with me? I'm going to talk about all that. So let's talk about the redesign first. One of the things that came up, in my opinion, with the redesign was, maybe it's time for a refresh of the design of some of my thumbnails and some of, whether it be the thumbnails that appear on Apple or Spotify, those the podcast only, or the videos when it comes to the videos on YouTube, or even the logo. So there is a redesign in the process. I'm really anxious. Hey, if anyone has an idea, or, Mike, I happen to be a designer, which I was a web designer. I don't claim to be a great designer. I'm more of a web designer type of person. But if you have some ideas, reach out. Reach out at mike@we'renotstumped.com. Give me your ideas. Actually, you know what I want to do too over this, for the next future, whatever this means. I want to do a Facebook Live or a YouTube Live. So if you're interested in being one, we'll have a panel discussion. If you're interested, I don't care, former guests, future guests, never been on, only listen, reach out. Let's do it. Let's have some fun. So now I want to get into the actual nitty gritty, or what does it take to be on the podcast? Because I think there's a fear of being on a podcast. It's not for everyone, and I get it. But it's easier than you think. If you really have an interest, I would love for you to reach out. I'm very proud to say I'm booked out a month or two right now as far as when the podcasts are going to be released. But I will record whenever you're available. That's going to be one of the steps I talk about. So what are the steps? Say you're listening to the podcast and you're like, I really think my story can enhance this podcast. I went through some things and I learned some things, and there's people that are probably in the same part of the journey that I was very early on, and I want to share so I can help them. What do I do? Well, there's a couple things. Number one, I'm going to give you 2 email addresses. One's my personal, so let's give you that. My personal email address is mike@mikebolland.com. mikebolland.com. Feel free to reach out to me for any reason. If you just want to talk, or hey, Mike, I don't want to be on your podcast, but I'd love a few minutes of your time to talk about X, Y, or Z within the limb loss community, within the differently able community. Contact me. We'll set something up. I love talking to people. Number 2, the other email address is mike@we'renotstumped.com. So those are 2 ways as far as email that you can get a hold of me. Another way, on we'renotstumped.com, there is a guest inquiry form. Fill that out. As I just had a few minutes ago, someone just reached out to me a couple minutes ago and wants to know what the next steps are to get on the podcast. and I will be reaching back out to them with all of this information. But if you reach out on that contact form, I will get back to you. And what do I get back to you with? Really, there's two things. One of the things, and these were all different. I'll send you a couple PDFs. One's a little bit about me, so you get a little bit, you go, oh, okay, that Mike seems like a good dude. Hopefully you feel that way. But number two is a podcast overview. This is a podcast overview that I will send you. It's a PDF. And in this particular one, I have different ones for the support field, for the differently abled community, for caregivers. Everyone's a little bit different. The questions will be a little different. This one, I'm going to read some of the information that I have on here pertains to people within the limb loss community. So as an example, first thing I say is thank you for your inquiry and wanting to be a guest. We're very excited to have you on the podcast. What is our purpose? To have you, our guest, share your story. Now, please note, if you're remote, the episodes will be conducted over Zoom. So there's some information for you. We're going to do it over Zoom. And they're going to be recorded and shared on YouTube, but all the platforms. They're going to be shared on Apple and Spotify, iHeartRadio. You get the picture. The typical episode length. So if you get an idea, a typical episode, if you're going to commit time to it, 20 minutes is like the least amount. And they could be packed full of unbelievably great information. I've gone up to 45 minutes over an hour. Again, if the conversation is what it is and it's great and we're rolling, let's keep rolling. As long as you're good with it, I'm good with it. So how do we start? How do we start the podcast? I always start the podcast with a segment I call In Your Own Words. And here's why I explain that. So I want to hear your life story, and the audience needs to learn about you as a person. And when I'm on the pre-conversation, I always tell people about that segment. Don't worry about going back. If you think to yourself, hey, Mike, you were born like you were with limb loss, but mine happened 2 years ago. I'll start 2 years ago. No, don't worry about that. Go back to birth if that's what you feel comfortable with. Well, I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, and I played sports my whole life. And these things really set up the story of you and how maybe you became a part of the limb loss community. So I urge everyone to be on here to talk about yourself and to always start out with In Your Own Words. The nice thing about being on the podcast is it is about you. You don't have to do any research. Me, I got pages of research. I like to research the people that are going to be on the podcast because I owe it to you to ask very intelligent questions about you, questions about your life. So it paints a picture for the audience. But remember, that's not something you have to do. You don't have to prepare. You know your life. I have to prepare because I want to make sure that the best version of you, or the version of you that wants to be communicated, is communicated. As a matter of fact, I'll ask you sometimes. Actually, I shouldn't say sometimes. What are the talking points? Is there a talking point you want to make sure that gets out there? So I can tee that up and question it. It could be a GoFundMe page, or it could be, Mike, at this part of my limb loss journey, this is my aha moment. And can you please ask me about that so I can explain it? Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's other questions, and these are just general questions I probably will ask. What are some of the challenges you've had to overcome and why? How are you accepted by your friends and family, from others when you're out and about? We all know we're on display, right? What are some of the positives that came from your situation? And do you wear a prosthetic? And if you do, can you talk about your prosthetic journey? Can you show us your prosthetic? And as far as like the recording devices, good. Here's a good setup, not a great setup, but here's a good setup. A phone or a tablet with a built-in camera and a built-in microphone. Better would be a PC or Mac with a built-in camera and microphone using an external headset or earbud. And here is the best. If you happen to have this type of setup, it's very much appreciated. It helps the quality of the podcast tremendously. A PC or a Mac with a 1080p external camera, an external headset, an external earbud, and or external microphone. Now, one of the very last things I say in this overview is, if there's any questions, if there's anything within your journey you don't want to talk about, let me know. It's okay. It's okay. My job is to make sure that you are comfortable, and I'm not going to put you on the spot. And one thing I'll say about that too, let's say you go, there's nothing I can think about. Then we get into it and I ask you a question and you're like, you know what? That's not really one I want to answer. I do my own editing. I already talked about it. It'll be gone and the audience won't even know because I'll be able to edit it right out. Here's another thing I get questions on. Mike, I don't really have a cool story. It just happened and I'm living life and it is what it is. There are other podcasts that just want to glorify or exemplify, how do I want to say it, like the leaders in the limb loss community. Great. I've had them on too. I've had John Register, the former CEO of the Amputee Coalition, plus others. I've had many leaders within the limb loss community. But that isn't a 360-degree view of what it is to live with limb loss and limb difference. The best stories are the everyday stories. The best people are you and I. Your story is the type of story that's needed to be on this podcast. So if you're on the fence going, well, I was on the Pro Bowler Tour, the first person with limb loss on the Pro Bowler Tour. So I'll use myself as an example. And I was in a movie, the Trial of Billy Jack. So those are cool stories, but that isn't me. The best part of the stories in my life, the thing that my biggest accomplishment, even with those two things taken into consideration, wasn't those two things. And some of the other things I've done in my life that I've been very proud of. My biggest accomplishment was working at a tire store called Discount Tire, who questioned whether they wanted to hire a person with one hand because, let's face it, they had to do things safe when I was working in the stores. And I proved that I can do it with one hand. That's the coolest story. Changing tires is the coolest story in my life. And I even went on to work at corporate, and I ran their e-business department, their digital marketing, their social media, their customer experience, many things before I left that career to do what I'm doing now and talking to you. But the coolest thing I ever did was prove that I can do something with one hand. Those are the stories that I want on the podcast. They could be everyday things. They could be, I figured out how to cut onions with one hand. I'm talking about my personal situation. There's situations out there though that Tracy LaMarche, she went back on stage as a bodybuilder after having one of her legs amputated. That's fantastic. What a story. What a story that is. So your stories that don't have to be cool and, oh my gosh, look at this person. Because you are special. If you're part of this community, you are special. And I want to hear from you. I send a booking page. That's another thing. If I didn't say that as far as I did not. So this is terrible of me. One of the most important steps about being on the podcast is me sending you my booking page. And I block out my calendar so you don't take a time that I'm already busy. This is all about when it's convenient for you to record this podcast with me and for my audience. With that said, I'm going to end this podcast. I urge everyone that wants to be on the podcast to reach out. And as I do every week, especially on the 100th episode of the We're Not Stumped podcast, I'm going to end it with one thing, one thought. Everyone out there, please have a great week.